Denver Broncos are preparing to take on a tough Philadelphia Eagles football team led by Jalen Hurts. His ability to throw the football, not to mention hurt you with his legs on the ground, pose a little bit of an interesting matchup problem for the Denver Broncos defense. Not to mention, can the Broncos win their matchups on the outside against Darius Slay with Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, Sayre, Bedinger, Louie, DiBiase, host of Locked On Eagles, and myself. We join forces today for a crossover episode, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Eagles, all today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is another Locked On NFL crossover. You have the AFC West taking on another NFC East opponent. Very fun, as always, to break down these matchups with the opponents that each team is facing. For the Broncos this week, it'll be the Eagles. For the Eagles, it'll be the Broncos. I'm Cody Roark, joined alongside co-host Sayre Bedinger of Locked On Broncos. We're talking with Locked On Eagles host Louie DiBiase. Today's crossover episode, ladies and gentlemen, is brought to you by our good friends over there at McDonald's, and they've been proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center, and a big thank you to our friends over at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. Gentlemen, I'm loving it. We get to preview this big matchup on Sunday between these two teams that we respectively cover. Louie, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing good, guys. I've never been able to do a show with you. I took over Locked On Eagles in the offseason of the Super Bowl, and that was the last time they played was 2017. The Eagles crushed Denver in that Super Bowl season. Carson Wentz was in the midst of an MVP run, but a lot has changed in 4 years. The NFL really does stand for not for long for a reason, and a lot has changed with these teams for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on. And Louie, we're going to open things up by asking you questions as it pertains to the Eagles this season, just kind of the things that are going to give Broncos fans a little bit more perspective. You know, first off, I want to talk about the offense. Obviously, for Nick Sirianni, working here with Jalen Hurts, what's been the theme here of this Eagles offense so far in 2021? Because sometimes before I've been able to dive into the film, I would scroll through Twitter and I would see things from Eagles fans about Jalen Hurts maybe being inconsistent or Nick Sirianni not calling a consistent game. So for Broncos fans on the outside, they maybe want to know a little bit more about the opponent. What can you tell us about this Eagles offense?
Yeah, it's an offense that honestly is very different from what it was to start the year. It really seemed like through the first, I would say, honestly, since the last 2 weeks, the first 7 games of the season, they were trying to see if Jalen Hurts could be the guy you win because of and be the high volume, high efficiency passer within the pocket and also outside the pocket. They kind of struggle with that philosophy and that identity. Jalen Hurts, at least, 13, 14 starts into his career as QB1, has not been that guy. So I feel like the last 2 weeks, Nick Sirianni has changed things up. They're a team that's much more under center now, traditional play action, running the football at a high volume and letting Jalen Hurts work with his legs. That's what works for them right now. And I think, again, you have to balance that short-term success versus long-term success kind of answer that you have to find out in a rebuilding year. You want to see if Jalen Hurts can be the guy, so you want to feature him. But at the same time, right now, philosophically, that's not how this team's going to win football games. So the last 2 weeks, they've been much more efficient because they're kind of taking the ball out of his hands.
Louie, that's good stuff, and I'm excited to chat with you about this game. I just got to bring up, you brought up the Carson Wentz MVP season, the Super Bowl season, history. I blocked that game completely out of my memory. All I remember is the Michael Vick game from 4 years prior to that when the Denver Broncos absolutely annihilated the Eagles. So
yeah, that's right.
Just had to get that one in. I block out the losses, Louie, and I remember the victories. So but I'm excited for this game. It's really taken a turn in the last couple of weeks for the Denver Broncos. Offensively, this is a team that has really struggled most of the year, I would say, to not necessarily find an identity, but just find any sort of real consistency. Talk to us about maybe what are the strengths and weaknesses of this Philadelphia defense?
Yeah, I think for the defense, it's really been a mixed bag this year. I think they've really struggled. One thing they've done really well is stop the deep play, which is normally the Achilles heel of the Eagles. Throughout the last decade, they have not been able to get the secondary right, specifically at corner. They get beat deep all the time. This year, though, new defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon has made such an emphasis on stopping that play. The issue, though, is that they're allowing everything else within 20 yards to to be had. And so that's kind of the issue with this defense. But the strength has been preventing big plays. And also, I think the defensive line is still the strength of this unit when it comes to getting to the quarterback. And they have to, because they're using mostly a 4-man pass rush. They're at the bottom of the league when it comes to blitz attempts. So I think this defense still, as it always has been, runs through the trenches, and they really try to focus on stopping the deep ball. Is that the best philosophy right now with the way teams are carving them up? I'm not so sure, but that's what they're focusing on.
One thing, too, I'm looking at here on the offensive side of the ball, obviously the third-ranked red zone offense in the NFL, the Eagles here. One thing that stands out to me, though, that is really surprising, even though the Eagles right now are 3-6, they've only given away the ball 7 total times this season. Can you talk about that? Because when you look at the record versus the amount of times they've turned the ball over, something doesn't add up. Where has the real issue been here for the Eagles this season?
No, it's true. I mean, normally for a mobile quarterback too, some guys with that kind of style like to be more aggressive, but we saw it with Carson Wentz in Philadelphia before Jalen Hurts, but Jalen has a really good sense of knowing, when to get more meat off the bones and when to call a play dead and just take the positive, don't make a mistake, and move on to the next play. So they have been mistake free, which is a nice change of pace. But I think the issue at times is, though, Carson Wentz would take chances, and a lot of the time it'd be a crazy fumble or a bad interception, but other times it would result in an explosive play. And I think this team is really struggling in that area in the passing game. And I think a lot of that has to do with the quarterback. And although their red zone numbers look good now, it really was an issue early in the season. They were driving down the field, but were not finishing plays. The play calling was suspect too. They were really making it harder on themselves, cutting the field in half, really focusing on the boundary. It just, all of this to me, though, is a direct result of who their quarterback is right now. And so I think that's the major issue, because you look at the offense. I mean, their offensive line's been playing great. Their wide receivers are getting open. They have a good running game. They have a top tight end in the league. It's just that the passing game can't get going.
Yeah, and that obviously we saw a little bit get going against the Chargers. We were really pulling for the Eagles this past week as Devontae Smith kind of had a breakout game. Talk a little bit about his progression, where you've seen him grow the most over the first half of this season.
Yeah, Devontae Smith has been as advertised, and that's a nice change of pace, guys, because the Eagles have been terrible at evaluating the wide receiver position. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside in the second round of 2019. Jalen Reagor in the 2020 first round. He's been a bust in year 2 yet again, like he was last year. Devontae Smith, at third time's the charm. He looks like the Heisman winner from Alabama. And that's despite the offense really not featuring him, focusing more on getting the other receivers open, manufactured touch-wise, because they can't get open like Devontae can, right? So he's still making plays despite that, and despite his quarterback not really being a high efficiency passer right now. He is just so good at creating with the route running and run after the catch ability, and on press man coverage, soft zone. He knows all coverages, how to get open. You can just see the nuance, and kind of like Jerry Jeudy, right? Both these guys at Alabama, you can just see the crafty route running. It is so fun to watch, and it's such a nice change of pace. The guy's on pace for over 1,000 yards, and that'd be the first time an Eagles receiver's done that since 2014. It was Jeremy Maclin. So it's been a long time, and it's a nice change of pace.
And he's a special young player as well. And obviously we'll get into some of the matchups we have our eyes on in this game, specifically on Sunday, coming up here in just a moment. But we're also going to flip the script. Louie's going to ask Sayre and myself some questions as it pertains to the Denver Broncos. But before we do that, let us tell you about the sponsors of today's episode, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Eagles crossover show. And this episode of the Locked On Broncos, Locked On Eagles crossover is brought to you by our good friends over there at McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect. It's a place where classmates can come to meet up for a study group, knowing that they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team or the away team can come to recharge. And it is the place that you always look forward to stopping to when you're on a long road trip to rest your legs and to refuel. And if you're like me, you like breakfast at McDonald's, get yourself a McRoark, a sausage egg McMuffin, but get yourself a hash brown, cut it in half, put it inside the sausage egg McMuffin, and that'll help carry you through your day. That is my go-to at McDonald's, and I love it, and I hope you love it as well. We got a lot of listeners of Locked On Broncos that send in their pictures of their McRoark. So head to your local McDonald's to refuel and reconnect. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it. And I'm also loving the Get Upside app too, ladies and gentlemen, because I am so tired of paying full price at the gas pump With the Get Upside app, I don't have to do that anymore. And if you can download the free Get Upside app in your app store, whether it's a Google Play or the Apple App Store, you will never have to pay full price at the gas pump ever again. And you can get 25 cents per gallon cash back every single time that you fill up at the gas tank today. And if you use promo code touchdown today on your first sign up and your first fill up, they'll give you an additional 25 cents per gallon cash back today. That is 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank fill up with the Get Upside app. And if you travel as much as me, you can make up to $200 to $300 a month in cash back alone. And they make it easy for you to cash out. You can connect your bank account. You can connect your PayPal. You can also cash out with Amazon gift cards or other gift cards from other brands today with the Get Upside app. So download it in your app store and use promo code touchdown to get 25 cents per gallon cash back today with the Get Upside app.
All right, guys, this is Crossover Thursday. Locked on Eagles, locked on Broncos. We are previewing a Sunday matchup between the Eagles and the Broncos. And guys, I think it's interesting when you look at where these teams are right now. Wouldn't you agree they're kind of in weird spots where they have pieces that make them competitive, right? The Broncos right now 5-4, the Eagles 3-6, but I feel like they've been playing a lot of these games close, and yet at the same time they're in transitions trying to get back to where they were as title contenders in the 2010s, right? The Broncos and Eagles won Super Bowls only 2 years apart. It's just interesting to see where these teams are at, and I feel like if they could get quarterback right, I don't know, 2022, they could be legit teams in these conferences. But I mean, with Denver, how long sometimes it takes to find that guy.
Yeah, and I think Denver's been really trying to figure that out. I mean, every week we just hope that if the game is on Fox, we don't have to see the quarterback carousel graphic going round and around. It's something that's so frustrating, I think, for us and also for Broncos fans, just because it reminds us that the Broncos have really struggled to find that quarterback after Peyton Manning. Now, I will say this, Teddy Bridgewater has had his ups and downs this year for the Broncos, but he has kind of exceeded, I think, expectations. He's 2 touchdown passes away from having the most touchdown passes in his career in a season. So that's something that kind of maybe he can hang his hat on, but he just has to make smarter decisions with the football. He's got to get it out quickly and not take some of the hits that he's been taking. But last week against the Cowboys was probably one of his better games that he had put together for the Broncos. But as you mentioned, everything is still on the table right now. The Broncos a couple of weeks ago traded away Von Miller to get more draft capital, second round, a third round pick there. But they could also maybe use all this capital to make a pursuit for another quarterback this offseason. And maybe it's via trade, maybe it's in the NFL draft. I know it's still a long ways away, but yeah, so far Teddy's been steady for the Denver Broncos. And what we saw against the Dallas Cowboys, obviously a division rival, we want to make sure that they had to take care of business for you guys there in that division. Right. But it's up in the air as to maybe whether or not he's the long-term guy. I think that most people will say he's probably not, but you never know. I think so much depends on what happens this offseason with the Broncos.
No, I think that's a great point, and Denver is a team that I think is part of the reason I'm kind of nervous about the Eagles and their quarterback pursuit this offseason, because I think a veteran like an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson or even a Deshaun Watson, like you look at these two teams and their situations, I would rather go to Denver. And also they had a heavy presence at the Ole Miss Liberty game, and that featured Matt Corral and Malik Willis, two of the top quarterback prospects in the 2022 draft. So it'll be interesting to watch these two teams. And because, guys, wouldn't you agree? I think both are, you mentioned this with Teddy Bridgewater, they're both in a situation where it's not like they know for sure their quarterback's not the guy, but at the same time, there are doubts with Hurts and Teddy Bridgewater. And I feel like, honestly, Hurts' career path could be very similar to Teddy, right? Where he's someone the locker room will always want to play for. He's got a certain floor of production. He's efficient. And when the roster is right, you can win with that guy. It's tough to move on from that player, though, sometimes when you know the ceiling might be capped.
It is, and we're seeing that with Vic Fangio and really being in a make or break season, choosing Teddy Bridgewater over Drew Lock, who might be the more high upside option, right? So exactly what you're saying is, Teddy really, the locker room has really rallied around him. Players really rallied around him, and he's a good leader for that team. You can just tell by the way that, the way that he goes up to guys after plays or after touchdowns or after game, different things like that we can actually see. Not that we're in the locker room every single day, but you can tell that he's a guy that the players are on the team really respect. And Drew Lock even talked about the fact that, he's learned a lot from Teddy Bridgewater. So I think you're absolutely right in that. And we saw that, I covered the draft as well for a long time, and I saw Jalen Hurts go to an Oklahoma team where, I still remember the video of him on the squat rack and every teammate around him, so you're absolutely right. He has something about him. He galvanized the teammates. Teddy Bridgewater has that same type of thing. And it is tough for NFL coaches whose jobs are consistently on the line to move on from those type of guys.
It's 100% correct. I think that's a really good point. And I think Von Miller said it in the preseason. They were mic'd up and he was like to Teddy, you have things that I haven't seen since 18 was here. And that's pretty noteworthy, especially for a guy like Von Miller saying that to him. Guys, speaking of Von Miller, he was traded before the NFL trade deadline last week to the Los Angeles Rams, one of, if not the best edge rusher in Denver Broncos history. To me, the reason you won a Super Bowl in 2015. How do you replace that production? I know it's hard to replace a Hall of Fame player, but who are the guys now the Eagles need to watch for on the edge and on that defensive line in general?
Well, I think it was a by committee approach. That's something we had talked about too, because the trade came last Monday, and I think everybody in Broncos country was shocked. We were shocked sitting here covering the team, and we were thinking, okay, well, hey, Bradley Chubb's out right now with an injury. He's on injured reserve. Who are the Broncos going to have at pass rusher? Malik Reed. Well, Malik Reed missed the Dallas Cowboys game with a hip injury. So then you have to rely on 7th-round draft pick Jonathan Cooper and then your newly added guy via trade, Stephen Weatherly. And the Broncos went in with those guys, and they did fantastic. Jonathan Cooper came away with 2 sacks against the Dallas Cowboys. And even though he was taken in the 7th round, his ceiling, the way that he plays, is not like a 7th-round draft pick. So they're getting those guys involved in the mix a little bit. You're also mixing in maybe some other guys like Aaron Patrick. They've invested in some guys on the practice squad at outside linebacker specifically while they wait for Bradley Chubb to return. But more than likely, it's going to be between Weatherly, Malik Reed, and Jonathan Cooper. But I imagine at this point in time, it's going to be Weatherly and Cooper that get to start the remainder of the season if, in fact, Bradley Chubb can't return healthy. So they got good rhythm with these guys right now. So it's really the Broncos have taken this by-committee approach to getting to the pass rusher, and then you still have your interior guys there with Shelby Harris, Draymond Jones, a little bit more Deshaun Williams, Shamar Stephen. These guys are getting involved in the mix a lot here. So the Broncos really utilizing as many bodies as they can to try to create pressure and get after quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think you look at, too, the secondary. I'm a big fan of Denver's personnel. They spent a first-round pick on an Alabama guy, just like the Eagles did, but it was in the secondary, and it was a name that Locked On Eagles, myself and Gino, we talked about a lot, Patrick Surtain, because we thought, the Eagles were in the cornerback market. Surtain, J.C. Horn as well. They went with Devontae Smith. Those two know each other, very familiar with each other at the Crimson Tide, could be going up against each other on Sunday. I like that matchup. How has the rookie looked this year?
He's been awesome. Like you said with Devontae Smith in the previous segment, as advertised, right? And what he was advertised as, and I said this on our podcast a number of times, evaluating him from a draft perspective at the age of 18 at Alabama, he looked like a professional already. And he's consistently been so good that he was almost boring for people to scout. And I think that's kind of what the Broncos said in their behind the scenes draft meeting. It's like, where's the flaw in this guy's game? You choose him over 2 available quarterbacks at a transition period where a new general manager is coming in, John Elway's moving out. You pick the safe pick and Pat Surtain, and all of a sudden fans are going nuts, and now he's on the field and everybody's all about PS2. He's got a little bit of a knee sprain right now. We'll see how that kind of factors into what he does this week. But the Broncos, like you said, the secondary personnel, they have the ability to match up with a variety of different guys on the back end. They'll rotate those safeties up and down. Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, obviously Caden Stearns, another rookie out of Texas. I believe he has 3 interceptions now this season, been playing out of his mind when he's getting on the field. He's blitzing, he's playing in coverage, he's doing a little bit of everything. So it's been a group effort from those guys. Injuries have forced the issue there, but at the same time, it's been really encouraging to see not only these guys playing multiple positions, but really improving as the season has gone along.
Guys, before we take a break and dive into the matchup here on Sunday, one other question, sticking with the Denver secondary. You guys have Ronald Darby, and that is a player that the Philadelphia Eagles fan base is very familiar with. They weren't big fans of him. He was kind of public enemy number 1 on Twitter for a while. How has the former starting corner in a Super Bowl year looked for the Broncos so far?
In my opinion, I'm a DB guy, Louie. I think he's been fantastic. Now, he got injured week 1 late in the game. He hurt his hamstring. He went on IR for a short stint. He came back against the Las Vegas Raiders, and he had a blown coverage against Henry Ruggs III. But then he comes in and he gets more acclimated against the Cleveland Browns, and he also gets a little bit more comfortable against the Dallas Cowboys. So he looked really good in that Cowboys game, specifically covering guys like Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb. He has been fun to watch when I go back and watch film. Don't see a lot of mistakes from him.
This is Locked On Eagles, Locked On Broncos, crossover Thursday. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, we'll get into the X's and O's, the best matchups to watch in this Sunday battle.
BetOnline is back and better than ever with a brand new interface for the start of the NBA basketball season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all things pro basketball, pro football, and college football. And you can head to their new website and updated interface using your desktop or mobile device. And when you sign up today for your first deposit, make sure you use promo code LOCKEDON, and that's going to get you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit today at betonline.ag. From basketball, football, baseball postseason, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, breaking down the game here. We've talked about some of the storylines for each team on the Broncos side, the Eagles side. I want to talk with our gentlemen here, Sayre Bedinger and Louie DiBiase. I want to talk about some matchups that we're excited to watch. And Louie, I'm going to start things off, my friend. For me, one of the key matchups I'm really looking forward to watching here for the Broncos versus the Eagles, it's going to be Courtland Sutton or Tim Patrick against Darius Slay. Now, watching Darius Slay in the film review this week, he's been one of those players you don't always want to test. I think he's had a fantastic year for the Eagles. He's blended into kind of what they want to do schematic-wise. This is a matchup that I am really interested in seeing because Tim Patrick, coming off of a big game against Trayvon Diggs, got him for a touchdown on a double move. Courtland Sutton only, not seeing as much action. He had one catch for 9 yards against the Cowboys, but he wasn't the primary feature guy in the offense in that game. And I think that these receivers have all accepted the role that, hey, 1 week, one guy might eat, the other guy might have a little bit of a role that maybe if they need him on third down, he might get one catch and it moves the chains. But Darius Slay versus these two big wide receivers is one matchup I'm looking forward to seeing. In your opinion, how might Darius Slay match up against Courtland Sutton or Tim Patrick?
Yeah, I love the Denver Broncos wide receiver core, and I was a big KJ Hamler guy too. Unfortunate that he won't be playing in this game with that injury. That's a fun trio, Hamler, Sutton, and Jerry Jeudy. I look at Darius Slay. He's been having an incredible season. It's a little frustrating, though, because Jonathan Gannon is such a zone-heavy defensive coordinator that it's frustrating sometimes Darius Slay can't be more involved in the game plan, that they're having him sit back 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. In all situations, even if it's like a third and short, they're just so nervous to get beat deep. And sometimes you're not utilizing Slay's, to me, top-tier ability to be a man coverage corner. And against some receivers like Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, you're going to have to let him go up to the line of scrimmage and make plays. So honestly, the matchup is Slay versus Sutton versus Jeudy versus Patrick, right? But it's also, to me, it's Gannon versus Slay in this defense. Gannon needs to get out of his own way and trust the personnel. They don't have a lot of great personnel on this defense, but one of the strengths you actually do have for the first time in a long time is at the cornerback position. Don't sit back, because to me, I feel like especially with a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, he's going to take what you give him. And the Eagles right now, guys, are on pace to give up the highest completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks in NFL history at 75.5%. That's got to change. It changed against Detroit. They went back to that old method against Justin Herbert and the Chargers. They got to be more aggressive against the Broncos this Sunday.
Definitely. And that's kind of where my key matchup is for this game, is right in the trenches. I feel like the Broncos are coming off arguably maybe their best game as an offensive line. And I don't know exactly what attributed to that, because they're missing starting left tackle Garrett Bowles. Graham Glasgow gets injured right before halftime. Your right tackle Bobby Massey gets injured during this game. So, and I've talked about this with Cody, actually, that I don't think it's necessarily a patchwork unit, because they've invested in the guys that are behind those players. But at the same time, how do you feel like this Eagles defensive line is going to match up in Denver? Because that's one of the things that I feel like the Eagles going into this season, as underrated as they were by national media and pundits, to me, they're really strong in the trenches on both sides of the ball, especially when healthy. So defensively, what do you see? How do you see that matchup unfolding between these two, the offensive line in Denver and D-line of Philadelphia?
No, it's a great question. I think, honestly, when you look at the offseason, everybody knew it was a rebuilding year for the Eagles, but why people projected them maybe to be a playoff contender, or at least win like a floor of, 7 wins, because they were so strong in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Unfortunately, the last few weeks, the pass rush hasn't really been that great. Fletcher Cox is having a down year. They're without Brandon Graham, who is the heart and soul of this team in general, to be honest with you, on the edge. Derek Barnett, their former first-round pick in a contract year, has been terrible, quite frankly. Only 1 sack this year. Javon Hargrave had 6 sacks the first 4 or 5 weeks. He hasn't had a sack since. They've really cooled off outside of Josh Sweat. Some of that's the personnel, but guys, it's also, too, it has to go back to the philosophy of the defensive coordinator. When quarterbacks are getting the ball out in 1 second, you're not blitzing. It's only a 4-man pass rush. I mean, what do you want a guy to do? Like they can't get there that quickly. So again, they need to help each other out. This defense just all three levels of it need to help each other out. Buy more time so this pass rush can get there, or else, as inconsistent as at times as Teddy can be, I think a guy like that's going to carve you up underneath. So this is the matchup I'm really looking forward to the most, is the Denver offense against the Philadelphia defense, because the Eagles defense, for all the things I'm talking about when it comes to Jalen Hurts, right? The defense has been the bigger issue consistently throughout the year.
Well, and I was going to ask you too about the matchup outside of that, right? Obviously, trench warfare is something we love. We love seeing offensive line, defensive linemen battle and clash. The run game obviously is a big part of this Philadelphia Eagles offense. They've really invested in, not only just with Jalen Hurts, but with a kind of a by committee approach with other tailbacks here. If there was one matchup that you feel like will define the outcome of this game for either team, what is it?
Yeah, again, I think it probably comes down to the defense against the offense for Philadelphia, but I do want to talk about as well on the offensive side of the football for the Eagles. It is that Devontae Smith versus Patrick Surtain matchup, because to me, they're running the football so much right now, and the way the offensive line is playing, the way Jalen Hurts had over 40 rushing yards in every start that he's had, which is an incredible number. He's on pace for nearly 1,000 rushing yards this year. So I'm not worried about the run game. It is back to the passing game. Even if they're only going to throw the football, it was 17 times last week. It was 14 the time before. Maybe the volume's not there, but the efficiency needs to be there. And it was there last week against the Chargers. And that was because of pretty much only Devontae Smith. He's got a tougher matchup now. The Chargers were without their top two cornerbacks last week. He's going up against a secondary that, like you said, Darby's having a great year. They have Surtain. They've got Simmons deep, Kareem Jackson. This is an improvement in the defensive backfield. Can they utilize the passing game at an efficient level? It doesn't have to be the volume it was early on in the season, but when you do pass, you've got to make this defense respect you being multiple, right? You can't be a one-trick pony.
That's spot on there, too. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to today's Locked On Broncos, Locked On Eagles crossover show. Broncos-Eagles kickoff this weekend on Sunday, Empower Field at Mile High, 2:25 p.m. Mountain Time, 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time here on the Eastern Time Zone. Louie, obviously a lot of great insight from the Philadelphia Eagles side of things. I know Broncos country learned a lot, and hopefully Eagles fans learned a lot from a Broncos perspective here on Crossover Thursday. But good luck to you and your squad here this week. Louie, tell Gino hi for us. I know we didn't get to get him here on this crossover, but always appreciate both of your perspectives there on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
Yeah, guys, we thank you for having us on the show. Gino's going to the game on Sunday, too. He'll be in Mile High, so I'm sure it's going to be a great one, and love both of these teams. Honestly, I really like the personnel in Denver. I've always been a fan of Teddy Bridgewater, so I'm excited for this one for sure.
It's going to be fun. Check out all the action, and make sure you follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast and provider for the Locked On Eagles podcast, Locked On Broncos podcast, and thank you for making these podcasts your first listen of the day.